Speaking of trade, the European Union is on the brink of a trade war with China, and the stakes could not be higher. China is the second largest economy in the world. The EU is the third largest. A trade war between them could be disastrous. So what is the flashpoint? Electric cars, or EVs, electric vehicles. Europe says China is flooding their market with cheap electric vehicles. How? By giving subsidies. As a result, European firms cannot keep up. They're losing sales and market share to China. Brussels is looking to correct this. On Wednesday, the EU chief announced an investigation into Chinese EVs. Listen to this.
Global markets are now flooded with cheaper Chinese electric cars. And their price is kept artificially low by huge state subsidies. This is distorting our market. And as we do not accept this distortion from the inside in our market, we do not accept this from the outside. So I can announce today that the Commission is launching an anti-subsidy investigation into electric vehicles coming from China.
It's a huge announcement, and I'll give you two reasons why. Number one, the European industry did not complain. So the decision to investigate China came from Brussels, not companies, not industry executives. And reason number two, this could snowball into a trade war. If the findings are negative, the findings of this investigation, if they're negative, Brussels could impose more tax on Chinese EVs. Of course, China will respond in kind. You could very well have a tariff war between China and the European Union. Beijing has slammed this anti-subsidy investigation. They're calling it protectionism.
What I want to emphasize is that the investigation measure that the European Union plans to take is to protect its own industry in the name of fair competition. This is blatant protectionist behavior that will seriously disrupt and distort the global automotive industrial chain and supply chain, including the European Union.
So what's the full story here? China is the largest EV producer in the world. They make up 8% of all electric vehicles sold in Europe. It could reach 15%, 1-5, by 2025, 15%. What explains this trend? Europe is known for its top-class auto industry. So why are Europeans buying from China? Because the EVs are cheaper, around 20% less expensive than EVs made in Europe. Chinese cars are 20% cheaper, and that is a big difference. Brussels is investigating how that difference is possible. China says it's technology and skill. But the European Union is not convinced. They think it has to do with state subsidies like tax cuts or cheap land or low raw material prices. The investigation will take around 13 months. If China has tinkered with the market, then there will be tariffs. Right now, the EU imposes a 10% tax on Chinese electric vehicles. The US imposes around 27%. So Europe does have some wiggle room. But is there merit to their claim? Local authorities in China still offer subsidies to EV makers. In fact, Beijing was warned about this. Let me introduce you to NIO, a Chinese automaker based in Shanghai. The founder of NIO sounded the alarm back in April. He said Chinese EV makers should brace for the possibility of tariffs. He also explained why. Apparently, Chinese EV makers have a cost advantage. Take battery prices, for example. In China, that's around $130 per kilowatt hour. Outside China, it's $151 or thereabouts. Beijing has been pumping in subsidies to prop up this sector. In 6 years, they have spent $57 billion, and this helps all car makers, in fact. Both Chinese ones like BYD and foreign makers like Tesla who run their factories out of China. But the end beneficiary is Beijing. So there is merit to Europe's claim. Yet two questions remain. Number one, why haven't European companies complained about this? Because they're scared of China. A German auto association says the EU must be mindful of a backlash from Beijing. So they want the EU to focus on other things, like lowering electricity prices or reducing government hurdles. Basically, they're telling the EU, do not pick a fight. And the reason is quite simple. China is a huge market for European cars, for European car makers. They don't want to risk a trade war. And question number two, if the companies are not complaining, why is the European Union complaining? Because of jobs. Europe's auto industry employs 13 million people. That's 7% of all European jobs in the auto industry. Now imagine European automakers cannot compete with China. What will they do? As they say, if you can't beat them, you join them. So European companies could end up shifting base to China, and Brussels is trying to avoid that, to ensure that the automakers and the jobs stay within Europe. That's the financial side of things. But you can't ignore the politics. China's support for Russia has ruffled a lot of feathers in Brussels. Most European nations see Beijing as a threat now. In that context, this investigation is not a surprise. It's just a natural course of action. But the bigger worry is this. Bigger economies are embracing protectionism. Like America, last year Joe Biden passed the Inflation Reduction Act. It calls for massive EV subsidies. If you buy certain electric vehicles, you get tax breaks worth more than $7,500. Just one condition: the EV must be made in North America. That's the US, Mexico, and Canada. The European Union criticized that decision as well. They called it discriminatory. So EVs promise to be political lightning rods in the future. Many believe it's the future of the auto industry. And if that is the case, every country will try to capitalize. Countries like Japan and Germany have built their economies around fuel cars. EVs could offer a similar opportunity.